Well, good morning and welcome to Sunrise. I'm Ayo Makinde.
And I'm Yomi Otaigbe. Thank you so much for joining us on this beautiful Saturday morning and a morning with good news.
Yes.
Good news coming from Kagara in Niger State.
Well, yes,
We
most
have the
certainly.
abductees
Released.
Released.
No. Let's begin this way. It's February 27.
Okay. Okay.
I'm very interested in that date because right now I'm beginning to realize how significant it is.
Okay.
February 27, 2021, the Kagara boys were released. Just one day after the abduction of another 317
In Jangebe.
or 307, I don't know.
Over 300.
More than 300, thank you, rescue. More than 300 girls in a school, Jangebe in Zamfara State. And the boys in Kagara were released completely. The question is, what's the correlation? What's the relationship? We're hearing the dynamics of how the abduction took place in the first place. Anyway, we'll go into all of that later on. So you want to talk about another February 27th?
Okay. The other February 27 is, okay, it's something that it's not cheerful, though, but it's something worth talking about. And
Certainly.
that is, it's been 1 year since we had the first COVID-19 case in Nigeria. When the Italian, remember, when he came into the country with the very first case at Ewekoro in Ogun State, where he was diagnosed and, was taken to Lagos and diagnosed. And we're looking at some of the figures. How far have we gone in Nigeria?
Thankfully, it's not been as bad in Nigeria as in a good number of other countries, and that's quite cheering, most certainly. Yes, not pleasant that it happened at all, but at least not as bad as it would have been, because, I mean, if you look at the projections of several, dignitaries all over the world saying if this
Talking
thing
about Africa.
Yes, if this will happen in Africa, the figures are going to be so many and stuff like that, but somehow it hasn't gone that way. Is this austerity? Is this, what's it called now? Whatever it is now. Some are blaming it on our nutrition, or rather, crediting it to our nutrition or weather.
Okay, whatever it is, I think it is something that we should still take very seriously.
Absolutely.
Because if we look at the figures, particularly for the number of people that have died, it is not, whether it is 1, 2, or 3 people, and we have close to almost 2,000 people that have died. So it's something we want to, take seriously.
Most certainly.
Because I was at the market yesterday and I still see that, not many people are still complying with at least the face mask. I was wearing one and, one guy was, just, making fun of me and saying, coronavirus. He was calling me coronavirus, but of course, I don't have to, listen to him.
It's really interesting how come people, because just this morning, a friend of mine, you saw me talking to this friend of mine who was saying, look, I was on a bus and on a shuttle bus, and I was the only one wearing the mask. And a good number of you out there must have had the same experience where you're the only one who is giving attention to all of these things. Now, does that make you strange? No, it makes others strange. And as one commercial...
But sometimes they want to make you feel strange because...
no, it's a choice.
Yeah.
If you want to feel strange...
That's what I said, that, you really don't have to just do what you have to do, because it's about you and it's about other people around you.
Absolutely. And the nutrition part that I wanted to mention the other time brings me to the 3rd, February 27th. I know you don't like the sound of it, but it is, it's National Protein Day in India today. Protein. And if you listen to, some of the things that they hear, one of the things that I heard was that as of 2006, it was identified, rightly or not, I don't know, I just talk for a living. It was, mentioned that protein is one of the things that helps with weight loss. How that is, I don't know. But there are so many things, so many angles to it.
Are you thinking that we should also, borrow a leaf and, try to make some of these days so that we can focus attention on them? If it's a country that we have over 40 percent of our children stunted, and you want to talk about nutrition.
That's significant. Anyway, you would know. You are more in the health sector than I am, so you would know.
So it's something that we should look at and see
Most
if
certainly.
we can borrow that lead.
Most certainly. I remember, I think as far back as the 80s, a good number of times you will hear things about malnutrition in Africa, and a good number of that, also somewhere in the northern part of the country. And with the kind of poverty rate that we have, back in time when you were growing up, you and I were growing up, what they would tell you is, eat food before you eat meat. You find, and then they will cut small meat for you.
Okay, so I think that should be changing now, because it's the children that need more
back then. Yes.
Of that kind of
protein and stuff like that. So perhaps it's a good thing for us to just give a thought to it. Maybe not declare a full day, knowing that it's a livestock in Nigeria is
consistent.
It's a 30 trillion naira business according to the federal government. So if you want to look at the business side of it, it is good. If you want to look at the nutritional benefits of it, most certainly something worth celebrating as well. But it is also February 27, and a good day for you to have a cup of cocoa or cocoa.
Just whichever one works for you.
No, cocoa is akamu. What do they call it in the north?
Okay, I don't know.
We call in Yoruba is ugi.
Yes.
In I don't know.
I think it's Igbo that is akamu.
Akamu, whatever. There's something they call it in the north. It's also very popular. Come on, Ayo. Anyway, whichever one it is.
You haven't taken cocoa this morning.
I got my cup of cocoa earlier this morning. I got my pure cocoa this morning. But you may want to choose one. But that is cocoa you want to have or cocoa. Which one have you had? None of the above. But
I've had water. So at least that's good for me for this morning. So,
okay.
Let's see what we have on the menu.
Yes, most certainly. Menu, cocoa. Menu, cocoa. But menu on the program today, the first one is...
Okay, the Anti-Graft Agency. Is it a new dawn?
Or a continuation of the old? Good question. Given that we have a new sheriff in town, as I say. Curbing banditry and insurgency. Really, which one are we contending with now? Banditry, insurgency, or a mishmash of both? Get more details on the program today.
And then we'll move on to talk about, of course, coronavirus, as we are looking at 1 year of that pandemic in Nigeria.
And then we have talked so many times about the downstream sector. Earlier last year, we listened to the GMD of the NNPC telling us that we are going full stream into the deregulation of the downstream sector. What's that about? More details today.
And of course, we have our taste of the week. That's that part that's relaxing.
Is he a she or a he or a shim or a him? It's not in the dictionary, so don't look for it.
Don't go looking for it. So you just come along with us this morning, have your cup of cocoa. Cocoa, as he has said, and look at the EFCC. There's a new leadership. A lot of people are looking at the very young person who has taken over the helms of affairs, and expectations are high.
Certainly.
Of course, there are concerns in some quarters, talking about some allegations. Of course, they tried to talk about them at that confirmation session. But what exactly should the new EFCC boss be doing now? Those are the issues that we are going to raise this morning. And we have with us in the studio a legal practitioner and President's Committee for the Defense of Human Rights, Mr. Malaki Ugumadu. Thank you so much for joining us.
I'm delighted to be here, except to say that I'm the immediate past president of CDHR.
Of CDHR. Okay, thank you so much.
And is the president.
Of course, we also have Mr. Debo Adeniro, the Chairman Coalition Against Corrupt Leaders, is joining us via Zoom. Thank you for joining us this morning.
Good morning. I'm delighted to be here.
Okay, so since I'm with you now, let me just ask you, what is your take on this new EFCC leadership?
Thank you very much. Actually, I have to correct what we call our name. We have rebranded since 2016 to Center for Anti-Corruption and Open Leadership. One, the new chairman, of course, he has been found, has a lot of work in hand. But first and foremost, he needs to declare his success. Because if you want to come to EPP, you have to come with plain hands. Two, he needs to prove those who accuse him of allegations of economic and financial crimes when he was in Port Harcourt. He needs to prove them wrong. It is not enough to say it at the clearing interview with the Senate that he has been cleared. Not only will he be cleared, he has to be seen to have been cleared. And that will not be done by himself or even the EFCC that is now leading. It has to be, the clearing has to be done by a third party, maybe ICPC or any other agency that is capable of doing such thing. If that allegation is not properly cleared, especially at the level of the Court of Competent Jurisdiction, it will still hang on him like a sort of Damocles. Then he needs to also detach himself from the apron of the Minister of Justice. You know that it is the same Minister of Justice who wrote a petition that led to the investigation of his predecessor, Ibrahim Magu. And from the rumors that is driving, we believe that they, even if they are not cousins, as they seem to say, they are from the same state. So he needs to prove to us that the petition written by the Minister of Justice was not meant to clear the way for him to occupy the office. And you know, it has not been, it has been a lot of loss between the minister and the chairman of EFCC. Usually, the minister wants to control everything that is done by the anti-graft agency. And the anti-graft agencies are not usually comfortable with that. Knowing that the minister is a politician, he will always want to protect those people that are with them, maybe in the same party and so on and so forth. And that is why many of the ministers took or still take delight in entering knowledge to secure on several cases that are being pursued by anti-graft agencies. They don't like that. Now that the chairman is even closer and far, far younger than the minister, a lot of people think that the chairman may become errand boy for the Minister of Justice and Attorney General of the Federation. So you need to clear that. Then they have to end the dichotomy, or maybe iron out the dichotomy between the operatives of the EFCC, those who have police training background and those who don't. And of course, there have been a lot of discussions about favoritism and even politics within the EFCC itself, where a number of his police, not necessarily those that are in first one of EFCC institutes with them, even those who believe that they have better training than he does, those politics and competition and jealousy will be there. So he needs to humble himself, but be firm and ensure that no case is left uninvestigated. No case is left unprosecuted diligently. And one of the ways to prove that it's not tied to the apron of the minister is to ensure that there is thorough investigation on all those cases, like the one of MTN, like the one of Malabu, like the one of Abdul Rashid Mena, and a lot of other things. We are delighted that he has talent qualifications that, just like his predecessors, just like this, now younger. And, well, I wouldn't know if that is an added advantage, because experience is not something
Mr. Adeniro,
you can... Yes, yes.
Yeah, we'll come back to you. Let's hear from Mr. Ogumadu here. He's drawn up a whole list of, expectations for...
A to-do list.
To-do list from Mr. Bauer. He has said that he should declare his assets first. What is it for you?
Well, that's a statutory requirement, and I like the way he anchored it. If you come into equity, you must do equity. More to it is that Nigeria has been characterized in recent years by a lot of misgivings regarding our status as a clean country, in quote. And therefore, if you are going to take on that agency that drives a cardinal aspect of a government, the fight against corruption, the campaign against corruption, then you must not just be clean, you must be seen to be clean. That requires some added levels of transparency, accountability, and so on and so forth. No less in such instance where preceding your appointment, there have been controversies around your activities or perceived activities while you were heading the zonal office in Port Harcourt. But in this time and age, and that has been my response while I was confronted by the media, where you have citizen journalism, where everyone runs with any idea that runs amok in his or her head. Allegations are very common and very free to make. What is important is the quality and content or body of evidence that you have to establish that allegation. But to head EFCC is like to live above board. And that is the expectation, that is what the law requires, and that is what must be seen to be done. But
so he has to live above board. I think you just please hold on your thoughts. So we'll continue from where you stop after this break. Welcome back. Mr. Ogumadu, you stopped at where you were saying the new EFCC chairman should live above board.
Correct.
So,
I think it's applicable to everyone who superintends such an agency, because it's sensitive and the focus will be on you. But I'm happy he responded to that question. I'm also satisfied that in a country such as ours, we have a body, an arm of government that has a responsibility to screen, which is what happened. A body of over 100 persons would have done, in my view, some investigation, some inquiries into that allegation, and then come up with that. Besides, before such appointments, there are security checks, background checks on such persons, and we'll leave it at that. I'm in two minds going into that because quite a number of rumors fly around. No. That is not to discountenance the merit of what is there, but as it stands today, we have a new sheriff in town.
So one of the things that comes to mind with all of the things that you and Mr. Adeniro has said is that sometimes it will seem like, these issues are thrown out just to discredit ahead of time. If the issue is to discredit ahead of time, it would perhaps also, it could, okay, maybe I should make it a question for you. How significant is that effort or attempt to discredit this new EFCC chairman at fighting corruption itself?
Let us put it this way. Let us understand that that agency superintends a cardinal aspect of a government agenda, government policy, a government trust, that is fight against corruption, just as they declared provision of jobs and so on and so forth. And you have an opposing political party. You have those who have completely got disenchanted with this government. And you also have a country which is largely defined by corrupt activities. So what do? Even in our small circles, I have been a victim of reckless allegations, just so that you attack that which he has as a selling point, the credibility. And given that our country is now inundated with tales and woes of corrupt activities, even world over, regarding the corruption perception index and so on and so forth, it's only going to be given that once you throw that in the air, a lot of tractions will be created. But I tell you what, it is also in the midst of such allegations that the star shines, because you are not just able to discredit that, you are able to prove, almost beyond doubt, that your focus is on cleaning up the country and then taking on those whose activities it is to perpetuate this corruption, either in the perception of the people or indeed in the act. So that brings me back to what he must do. Good 18, he has precedents, he has predecessors. As I was discussing with you, he's about the fifth. From Nuhu Ribadu to Farida to my friend Lamude to the toughest of them all, in my view, Magu, and then himself. And he has been in there from 2005. EFCC was created in 2003. Now, he is also the first non-police man to ascend onto that office at his relatively young age, 40, Nuhu was about 43. The passion, the enthusiasm, the determination to prove the point clearly is there. I know him personally. But he must not discountenance what it is that has become that office. Sensitive, very, very, if you say slippery.
I was going to give you that word.
Deliberately focused on. And you would have these people who are clearly, whose life is built on corruption, are already an organized body in this country. And they do everything to coordinate their activities in a way to undermine that office. Once you are brought down, the whole system is brought down, the government is affected, and the people are left. So
what exactly will he need to do
to
address that particular issue that you
First is to be very conscious of it. Like I said, there are precedents, many, not one, all of them. All his predecessors have had cause to become victim of this fight back. In short, in the case of Nuhu, his life was on the line. We learned of Nuhu went to school as at that time, because it became clear that this guy must be taken out. He got caught in the political web of that moment, from the Bori to Yaradua time. And then Farida came in soon after. It was Lamude, all in controversies as they tried to do their best. In the case of Magu, up to today, no one can say clearly what exactly is his fate. What has become clear, however, is that the country has moved on.
So with the consciousness, what does he need to do?
So first is that he clearly will tap and leverage on the experience he has had.
Okay.
That gives him a leverage, considering that some of his predecessors were pioneer actors.
Yeah.
Nuhu in particular, up to Lamude. Second is that he must be able to elevate the act of transparency and accountability. There is a measure of accountability that you bring to bear on your activities. You will have the buy-in of the Nigerian people, and that is much more important than whatever the Attorney General or the President does. There are moments in this country when even objective civil society organizations resolved that there was the need to assist the anti-corruption agencies in fighting corruption.
Let me ask Mr. Adeniran. So the task is right before the new EFCC chairman to ensure that he is above board. But then it's not just going to take away the allegations. He's going to have to do his job in the middle of all of these. Now, if there is so much focus on trying to elevate himself as opposed to doing his job, wouldn't that be a distraction?
Well, those who appointed him, actually, I mean, those who appointed him seem to consider all of those things they should have considered before they appointed. And they actually raised the controversy that surrounds his appointment to beyond the rule. For example, why the hurried promotion that had to be given to him is like an afterthought, you know, placing the carts before the horse. Since they started considering appointing him, they should know that he needed to be on a great level that is beyond 13, where the appointment came to meet him. And all of these investigations, I mean, Malaki talked about background check. They could have done the background check. They could have sampled the opinion of those of us in the civil populace. They could have come up with a watertight, defense of their nominee before he's nominated. He needed to clear his name. No matter what is going to cost us, I think it's better than somebody of that status who should live above board to come within a controversy. Yes, it is true that all of the past chairmen of EFCC have been immersed in one controversy or the other. That was clearly noted by people as corruption fighting back. Because when they came in, apart from the outgoing acting or the last acting chairman, Ibrahim Magu, who came in amidst controversy generated by the DSS report on him. And of course, there were 2 reports of DSS on him. So that was the beginning of his own controversy. Others got into position when Madam Farida too came in, amidst certain controversy. It doesn't, such controversy didn't relate, wasn't related to their work, the work that they have done, places where they have worked before, and their qualifications. And like I said, wisdom never runs out of passion. I don't believe all of these not too young to rule is just absolute the way it is being touted. ECS is course 1 of EFCC Institute. There are several other people in that course 1. And the institute is also relatively young. And you can compare that with existing institutes like the police, college, and the rest of them. So I still believe that EFCC still needs the expertise that will come from an older institution that is almost at par with the university, if it's not at par already, that have had experience in working with, in other clients. That if you are saying that somebody, because it's been in EFCC for so long, there are a few people who have been in law enforcement agencies for so long, and they know all the looks and crannies of how corruption crimes are committed, more than those who came in so newly. So basically, that controversy has been generated by those who appointed him. Now, if he clears that, all the allegations against him, he needs to also ensure, apart from what I said earlier, that there is training and retraining of his officers, especially the investigators and the prosecutors, where there will be thorough investigation and there will be diligent prosecution towards getting conviction.
But Mr. Adeniran, if you just a moment, if you don't mind me asking, you've chronicled something quite significant here, and I think I'll ask Mr. Ogumadu here in the studio first of all about that. He's chronicled something earlier, and that's the fact that virtually every EFCC chairman before the new one was immersed in a controversy. In fact, he even cited that one or two of them came into office in controversial circumstances, which hung around their necks all through their, stay in office, which was, in a way, a distraction because while the fight against corruption is going on, the noose, so to speak, on their necks is still there. It would, in a way, kind of undermine the fight itself, focusing the fight against corruption on one person as opposed to being an institutional responsibility, not an individual one.
I think it's important you raised this point because that will enable me address some critical aspects of this discourse that I think is not featuring prominently in the entire debate. The first is that the commission is an institution, not just an institution of government, indeed created by an enabling act of the National Assembly. It brings me back to a debate we have had about the contradiction of a government instituting an institution to fight corruption in the same government. I don't know if you understand what I mean. To what extent can an institution of government fight corruption in government? That is not to say there is no corruption outside government. But if in our climate, the much we have seen, even the aggregation of the perception index that we talk about is largely drawn from the activities of government. To what extent can an institution of government deal with corruption in government? That is at one level, and I'm not sure we can go into that debate. Secondly, BAWA is but one out of almost 20-something members of the commission. And the law is that the chairman and members of the commission, except ex-official members, shall be appointed by the president, subject to the confirmation of the Senate. I am referencing Section 2, Subsection 3 of the Establishment Act, that is the EFCC Establishment Act 2004. So what does that tell you? It tells you that the more we focus on the chairman, which is very, very important because he's like the driving force, you have the secretary of the commission, you have other members drawn from very sensitive agencies of government, including CBN, NDIC, the Army, all through. So what is the quality and content of these other persons? Because as we have seen, look at the government itself. Buhari Oshibajo talks about anti-corruption. We don't hear that vibration at the same level with the same zeal and zest from other members of the same team. In the same vein, if we focus all our energy on BAWA and forget that BAWA is just one out of about 20-something, and then refuse to do anything regarding even the morale in the commission, all of what is happening now has implications. You need to know what it takes to truly fight corruption within the limits of the powers that they have in Nigeria. You must clearly show that you are ready to give your life. I asked Magu myself as the national president of CDHR when he had cause to visit the group. And I put a direct question to him. We have seen how your predecessors fared in office. To what extent are you ready to confront this crisis of this country. And the reply I got was that even if it will mean that if he left this office this moment, he's removed from office. I don't know if you understand. That is to say, I am ready to go the whole hog. And you know, whether we like it or not, for as long as corrupt activities are high up there in our society, no matter how determined you are likely going to face as equal opposition, confrontation, distraction from this organized body of persons whose livelihood and existence hovers around corrupt activities. Because essentially, it has become a way of life, and for as long as you pose a challenge to their existence, for that long you will get the repercussion of what you are doing.
Okay,
and what is more, sir, okay. I'm going to round up by saying that one point we have not mentioned is that we must not discountenance the place of the law in the fight against corruption.
There are a string of laws, Mr. Gumadu. There are a string of laws.
And I'm talking about respect for rule of law and obedience.
We'll come to that because because the EFCC operates through certain established laws, of the Federal Republic of Nigeria. But we'll come to some of those other details when we come from this break. Stay with us. Well, thank you for joining us, for staying with us. So, Mr. Gumadu, you were trying to talk about the rule of law angle. So, what law are we talking about here? Because we have quite a few that the EFCC uses as instruments of its operation. The Advanced Fee Fraud Act, the Miscellaneous, Law Act, the Cybercrime Act, so many of them like that. So, when you're talking about the rule of law, there is a law. As you said earlier, there would be no need for EFCC if these laws themselves were effective. Now that we have EFCC, does it change the effectiveness or a lack of it, of these laws?
Now that there is EFCC and the EFCC is functional, what becomes paramount is that the EFCC must operate within the confines of that law.
Okay.
If it does or carries out its activities outside the confines of that law, those hawks I talked about will leverage on that to make nonsense of their efforts.
What has been the trajectory?
The trajectory is that we have seen quite a number of outcry on limited respect and obedience to court orders and the rule of law. And what do I mean by that? The activities of the EFCC span from investigation to prosecution to forfeiture to and so on and so forth. On the issue of investigation, which culminates into arrest, there have been serious outcry regarding abuse of the rights of the citizens of the country. In short, we have had calls in my group to collaborate in trainings. That is to say, much as we support what you are doing, those activities of yours must be, confined within the ambits of the law. What is the law? The law is that no person should be arbitrarily arrested or detained beyond the permissible period of time. The implication of that is that if you're going to take on any suspect, you must have discreetly conducted those investigators of yours up to the point when you are ready to prosecute, which will mean that at the point when you are arrested, it's either you are ready to grant bail or you are ready to move straight to court for the prosecution.
You're not arresting first and shopping
for evidence.
The evidence.
If you do that, you arm the suspect who may indeed be a criminal. Although it doesn't lie in your mouth to call him a criminal. It is only by the declaration of a competent court of law. But the issue is that in the way and manner they have, well, in some cases, in most cases, as I can say, it is in their determination to get to the point where they will secure conviction. They overreach themselves by committing some of these mistakes. It's not in all the cases, but in some of those few cases, particularly high-profile cases, the suspects have leverage on that to refocus the campaign such that if we're talking about a pure criminal activities, the attention will be dragged away from that and focus on the constitutionality of the arrest you have carried out. And that could be taking the whole hog. So at the end of the day, you spend years pursuing the shadow instead of the substance. These are the things. So I believe that Bauer, having been in the system and having had cause to engage at several levels, not just within, he's even a trainer. I mean, he's an instructor.
Yes.
With sufficient background in investigation, should be able to, to leverage on all of this and then come up with a strategy that clearly distinguishes his style from what others have done. Without losing the steam, because you need some very firm, resolved position to be able to fight corruption in Nigeria.
Let's go to Mr. Adeniro. It was interesting seeing the new EFCC chairman, reciting the pledge, pledging to Nigeria, I pledge to Nigeria, my country, to be faithful, loyal, and honest. So how thin is that line between the loyalty, for instance, to the president that appointed him and that pledge to Nigeria?
Thank you very much. First, we need to look at, because Malaki talked about the commission having several people opposing that. If you look at the Pack of Lions led by a sheep, it's going to be like toothless as the sheep itself. You have a pack of sheep led by a lion. It's going to be as first fighting as lion because he's the leader that is the face of the organization. So when people mystify this, view the institution, don't look at personality, it's a farce. To the extent that if the face of the organization is faulty, then the organization will be seen as faulty. And besides, the commission, the board of the commission has not been constituted for so many years. So it is the chairman that sits at top of it, and is the chairman that speaks for the commission. And it depends on how he still his points that will determine whether or not the commission will be doing well. That leads me to your question, whether he can detach himself from the apron of those who appointed him. Of course, it's like his fact that
I think technology is in the way. Mr. Ogumadi, you want to look at that aspect of it. The new EFCC chairman has pledged to Nigeria, but he also has someone that appointed him. How thin is that line?
The rope, they say, does not make the monk. I wish it's all about pledges. If it were, those who were dissatisfied with Trump's behavior would not have felt that terribly bad. Now, the test of the pudding is in the eating. We've heard about the pledge. We've heard about that robust resume. We've heard about his experiences. We've heard about all of those. Now, in the operations, Bauer, as young as he is, again, I'm sure many people will be scandalized that we're all focused on a 40-year-old man, describing him as a young man, as though the Clintons and Obamas were above that when they took on the reins of leading the most sophisticated countries in the world. So Bauer has a duty to the generation he belongs, who are now excited. He has a duty to the memory of Bauer as a human being, the commission, to establish a new paradigm, which is that my loyalty will be to the government and the people of this country, beyond my appointers. We are not going to sit down here and trivialize the enormity of the question you have asked. Quite frankly, even from the way he behaved when he met the president, which was shown on you, you could see that he was conscious that he was meeting the president, let alone the operations of it. But he also spoke about what he could do differently. And that is that he will bring all of those experiences he has. He will be able to show that he is out to solve the corruption problem in Nigeria. But I think that to be able to do that, he needs the courage of his conviction. It is sufficient to make those avowals. But it is much more important to, keep faith with those pronouncements in the thick and thin of his operations.
Let me ask.
And what I mean by that is that in coming to judgment, in exercising his discretion, in taking those sensitive decisions, you must rise above the contradictions I talked about, which is the contradiction of a state creating institution to fight corruption within itself, and focus on the survival of the nation that even created those institutions.
Okay. Mr. Adeniro, the EFCC is just one of a good number of anti-corruption agencies that we have in the country. The ICPC is one, the EFCC and the NFIU and, a few others like that. How strong would you say the anti-corruption apparatus of the Federal Republic of Nigeria is on its own? The institutions, the collaboration, the networking, and everything, as opposed to the individuals. How strong would you say the institutions on their own and as a network, how strong would you say they are in the fight against corruption?
First and foremost, we should realize that every agency has an act of the parliament that set it up. If the holders of office in those agencies determine to make it work, they will look at the acts that set it up rather than the persons that controls the instrumentality of governance. And you have several instruments that aid, the implementation of their responsibilities within the agency they are operating. For example, you have all these BVN, TSA, school, ACTU, all of these are tools that will help anti-graft agencies, even regulatory agencies like SON, like NAFDAC, and the rest of them, to do their work without fear or favor. But there is a lot of political intervention. That is what has to be removed. And that is where I agree with Malaki that heads of these agencies need to garner public will, so that the public will always support them. Because the opinion of the public does a lot of amendments to whatever the decision the authorities want to. Remember that Nuhu Ribadu actually got his boss, the then Inspector General of Police, arrested. And he didn't mind what it would cost him. Of course, it cost him. But then, it is the Nigeria that they pledge to serve, okay, with all their heart, with all the loyalty that they serve, that they should focus on, not the job. Because at the end of the day, if they lose their job and they still carry their dignity, they do not favor any political godfather while carrying out that assignment. Definitely, their name will still be intact. But there are a couple of agencies that one cannot vouch for. We do their work without fear or favor, without allowing the local of the office to get, to get into their head, and they misbehave in office. And if the focus is on Nigeria, definitely they will achieve the ultimate goal. And that is why we are saying that whoever is coming to equity must come with clean hands. As long as the public have reposed that level of confidence in anybody that is heading that agency, those who constitute the board can only do but little. course, the head of the agency will determine what happens within the agency. All other members of the agency come from outside of the agency. After their meeting, they go their various ways. The implementations of decision of that board will be carried out under the directive of the chairman. And like I said the other time, the board of EFCC has not been constituted for so long, meaning that the chairman will see all the work in that agency comes on the chairman's table. It's not discussing with NSA, for example. It's not discussing with DSS, those who are supposed to make contribution to whatever he does. So if the man wants to succeed, he has to work in synergy with other law enforcement agencies who will assist him with information, with intelligence agencies like DSS, like the police itself, like NSA, and other regulatory agencies that will feed it with, necessary information that will make their job easy to do. Remember that if corruption issues don't have international dimension or economic sabotage dimension, EFCC wouldn't have become necessary after ICPC. The job of EFCC will take them around the world, and they need to work hand in hand with all agencies that will facilitate their easy movement. And if they are in rivalry with them, that will not help. And that has been the reason why many agencies have not been succeeding. Basically, what we are saying is that the agency should focus on its assignment as provided by the act that establishes it, and not to pander to the dictate of maybe the supervisory ministry. And as a matter of fact, effort should be made by the National Assembly to remove the umbilical cord between the anti-graft agencies and the Ministry of Justice. That have been the reason for the discordant notes that are usually sung by the two agencies of government. If you remember Michael Adwaka, you remember Mohamed Adoke, you remember even the present one, they have always been at loggerhead with head of EFCC. Why? Because the politician in the minister want to protect politicians. Remember, most of the crimes, economic and financial crimes, are committed by politicians. And
Mr. Adeniro, yes, most certainly, you are making, good points here. But I like to ask Mr. Ugomado if he agrees with you. I just did I've done this a good number, quite a few times. Just Google a quick search of types and forms of corruption. The number one choice you are likely to have is political corruption. Incidentally, it is the political institutions that formulate the policies that become these laws, such as the EFCC Act and all of that. And now Mr. Adeniro is suggesting that we should sever the umbilical cord between the office of the Attorney General and Minister of Justice from that of the anti-graft agency, the EFCC. How's that going to work? Is it even possible?
And is it desirable? I think that should be the other arm of the question. I know we're pressed for time now, but all of these suggestions are made within the context of our historical experiences. From the Andoka to the Adoke and now Malami experience, we've seen a pattern. In short, the Committee for the Defense of Human Rights, on record, had cause to challenge Andoka regarding his interference with the EFCC of that time, and was able to itemize, collate, and publish all of the cases, particularly high-profile political cases, leading to corruption charges that were withdrawn from court. which is in exercise of his powers under Section 174 of the Constitution of the Federal Republic of Nigeria. But please go to that section. The first word used in that section, that discretionary power of the Attorney General of the Federation, replicated in the states with Attorney Generals of the state, is the power to initiate criminal prosecutions. You initiate, you withdraw, you discontinue. The first is to initiate. So the question was, how many have you initiated in relation to the number you have withdrawn? So Mr. Devo is quite right. The point is that all of these suggestions are made within the context of our history. And if we have a patriotic Attorney General, an anti-corruption person superintending the office of the Attorney General, this suggestion may be tweaked. And therefore, that's why I say, is it desirable? It is to know what is the supervisory role of the office of the Attorney General in relation to criminal prosecutions, not just by EFCC, but all prosecuting agencies, including NDLA, up to NAFDAC, EFCC, police. It is to have a coordinated approach to criminal prosecution in a way that aligns with the policies of the government. But I have not forgotten that contradiction that befalls an agency of government to deal with the corruption that you talked about that is prevalent within government circles.
Then that's a big challenge in
Big one.
itself,
Big
especially given that if any law is going to be tweaked along that line, it's the responsibility of the National Assembly.
Correct.
Made up of politicians.
Correct.
So,
not just politicians, the kind of politicians that both Obasanjo and one of the senators, I've forgotten his name, former police officer, have said that this house that we are in is populated by not just corrupt persons, but criminally minded persons.
Thank you so much for coming on the show this morning. We are hoping that, some of these suggestions that have been made here this morning will be taken into consideration, even as the new EFCC leader, continues.
If they are not, we challenge them. I have cases against EFCC with all the supports I give them. Live, Federal High Court will have cases.
Thank you. Legal practitioner and immediate past president of Committee for the Defense of Human Rights, Mr. Malaki Ugumadu, and of course on Zoom, joining us from Lagos, the executive chairman, Center for Anti-Corruption and Open Leadership, Mr. Debo Adeniran. Thank you so much for your thoughts this morning.
Thank you. Yes. Thank you.
We'll be back in a moment. Just stay with us.
27th of February 2020 remains fresh in our minds, but we're not going there yet. The 27th day of the year 2021, that's on our minds right now, is that the set of boys that were taken away from Kagara, that's Kagara School,
and others
and
in that school.
Others in that school have been released. And of course, we also understand that a good number of, more than 300 girls have been taken. But let's first of all speak with correspondent Emperor Simon, who is in Niger State, joins us right now. Thanks, Emperor, for joining us. Could you give us a quick update on the news that we're getting about the boys that have been released?
Yes, it's indeed a good news for Niger State government, having waited for this long, precisely 10 days after the abduction of 41 persons from the Government Science Secondary School, Kagara. We got information about their release as at yesterday night when we were told that they were released, but that they were on their way coming to Niger State. We were stationed at the government house waiting for that to happen. But at exactly 11 p.m., we were told that they might not arrive and that we were to go home. So we retired back to our various rooms yesterday until this morning very early when information started filtering about the release of the abductees and that they were on their way coming to Niger State, particularly the government house. So we went back to the government house again and started waiting. We were there. Of course, it was like a rumor, government officials not wanting to speak about it, people saying that it was not true. As a matter of fact, when we broke that news this morning, we were the first to break that news, and I started getting calls on why we should have broken that news because it was not confirmed by the government officials. But of course, we had sources everywhere who were giving us information about the situation. So we went to the government house and we started waiting. Not quite long, the abductees arrived, but as against our expectation that they were going to be taken to the government house, as it was the case with the 53 persons that were earlier rescued by the state government who were kidnapped on the Niger State Transport Authority bus. They were not brought to the government house this time around, but rather taken to a government hotel. As a matter of fact, I am standing in front of the government hotel where everybody, every journalist is waiting to get a glimpse of the abductees as they arrived. But we were barred from entering. Security men are outside. The gate has been under lock and key. Nobody apart from security agencies and government officials are allowed to enter into the hotel. So as it stands now, we do not even have information as to how many of the 41 abductees have been released. So it seems like we're just getting half information. Nobody is speaking to us. Government officials are not saying anything on this. The only thing we know is that they are saying that the reason they are being brought to this hotel is so that they can be attended to, because the picture we earlier got, the video that went on circulation when they were released, showed them in bad condition, some of them leaping, some of them looking very worn out. So we were told outside, not officially, that the reason they are being brought to this place is so that they can be attended to.
In any way seen, for instance, maybe some health personnel who may be coming to that hotel to attend to the abductees in terms of their health?
Yes, like I said, we've not been allowed to go in, but we've seen government officials, including officials from the Niger State Ministry of Health, coming into the hotel, and they have been allowed to go in. But we cannot at this point confirm whether there are health workers with them or not, because we do not have anything anything to show for that.
We understand that there are some visuals making the rounds of some boys. Could those videos be those of these boys or the Kankara boys? Which can you confirm if we have any recording of these boys?
Yeah, obviously from the language or what we heard, those who were shooting that video speaking, they were speaking the native language of the people of Niger State, particularly Nupe, Gwari, and Hausa. So that video, although we've not received confirmation, but it could be that of the Kagara boys and their staff who have been abducted and have been released. But no official information yet to confirm that video. But like I said again, the language we heard, Nupe, Gwari, Hausa, are some of the native languages of the Niger State people.
I guess this news of the release would have gotten to the parents and caregivers for some of these abductees. Are you seeing any of the family members around?
For now, there is nobody, no family member around yet. We can't see that, unlike the previous release that we witnessed, where family members were standing at the gate waiting even before the arrival of the abductees. So, like I said earlier on, the information on the release of these abductees is in a way ordered. Nobody is allowed, nobody is given the opportunity to get a feel of what is happening. So I'm not even sure if family members have been informed about this release. So because we can't find any of them here. Now again, that also brings me to the worrisome situation that we have in Niger State, where we seem not to have a well-defined line of communication from the government officials. Nobody is telling us exactly what is happening. We only see people snap video, snap pictures, and release them on social media. And then it becomes a rumor flying here and there, and nobody is willing to speak on it from the government angle.
Well, one natural question, Emperor, that must be asked is, to the best of your knowledge, was there any exchange of money, for the boys? Is there any ransom paid? Yes, the minister told us that that wasn't on the table, but can you confirm any information about that?
Yeah, at this point, we cannot confirm if there was exchange of hands in terms of payment of ransom by the Niger State government. Of course, the governor himself has often said that his administration will not negotiate with bandits for release of anybody or pay ransom, to anybody to release abductees. But again, when the 53 persons that were earlier rescued by the state government, started speaking on their ordeal, some of them did tell us that there was a negotiation, though they were not particular about whether it was government that was negotiating with the bandits, but they did tell us that there was negotiation, ransom was paid at some point. So right now we cannot ascertain whether ransom was paid for these abductees that have been released by the state government, but we know that the governor has been emphatic as to whether, as to his position that ransom will not be paid for the release of anyone.
Even though we can find that some pictures of these boys are awash on the internet, but then again, that's cannot be confirmed right now. But we have to thank you very much, Emperor Simon, and we know that as events unfold, you would keep us informed. Well, no doubt the issue of kidnapping, insurgency, banditry for ransom, they continue, and that's persistently created tension all over the place. Of course, the latest you are aware of is what happened in Zamfara State, and most certainly something that would give anyone concern.
Something that Emperor mentioned just now about information, because information is very key. When there's the absence of it, there's a gap. People would try to fill in that gap, and
most
sometimes
certainly.
with misinformation.
Most certainly.
So we'll be looking forward to, the Niger State government giving us, more information on what is going on.
Just so as to allay fears and let's not even give room.
Put things in the right perspective.
Yeah, let's not even give room for fake news to strive. But let's have this conversation with retired Deputy Inspector General of Police, Joshua Kabila. He joins us from our Abuja studio. Thank you so much for joining us this morning. Most certainly, this is cheering news, and it would seem like this is like the pattern now. You kidnap children, and then you release them. You kidnap children, and then you release them, all in a whole, except the Chibok girls. Once any set of children are kidnapped, every one of them, or almost every one of them, are released, and we hear from what government says, no ransom is paid. What do you think is going on?
Well, thank you for having me. I think it does appear as if there's a script, or there was a script that has been written
and this script is also being played out. I think the perpetrators of this crime have something up their sleeves. And I think the earlier, the better drastic action are taken. Otherwise, I can see a situation where the bandits or these criminals have really studied what they want to do, and the script they've written, they've rehearsed. And this is what they're trying to play. And in doing that, we have to cut it off from the point of the fact that they have a script with them already rehearsed. If we don't do that, I can see that there's a lot of ideas they want to play out to ensure that schools, particularly the young ones in the secondary school, particularly the female, are completely discouraged from thinking of attending schools anymore. And so I think we must move quickly to ensure that these scripts are not rehearsed again and then played out.
It's interesting, the perspective that you've taken it from, talking about a script. And if there's a script, that means there was some thought into it and the script is written. What does this say about our intelligence gathering in terms of, our security agencies finding out about the scripts and, nipping some of these abductions in the bud?
Yeah, the intelligence is not effective. It's not effective because most of the security, whether the military, whether the police, the civil defense, and everybody that is in security, intelligence have not been strengthened, and also we've not imbibed the modern technology that we could have a lot of information without really truncating all those forests and doing a lot of walking and a lot of visiting to get these facts. We're still retaining the human factor of intelligence, and it's slow. And then we haven't. The intelligence is not working. And also, that in those days when we have police stations in the remote areas known as the police post, we have police post, we have police station before police division. We do not have those once again, because I can't imagine how people will walk into a school, pick those children at their own pace of time, and take them out without fear or entertaining the fact that they could be stopped from doing that. There's a lot of emptiness. There's a lot of ungoverned areas, and something quickly must be done to make sure that intelligence is strengthened. Really, there are no intelligence apparatus and people that gather intelligence in the rural area, and some of the suburb is absent.
Well, it's interesting that you bring in the issue of intelligence here. So, first of all, you talked about a script being played out. And if there is such a thing indeed, one would expect that intelligence would have picked up on that, and we would know exactly what we are contending against. Now, this seems to be repetitive kidnap of children, soft targets you call them. If there is a game plan, what should the authorities be looking at now, especially the police and other security agencies?
Yes, I expect the police and other security agencies to have it at the back of their mind that these people are not just doing it randomly. Remember, they're not just looking for anybody on the street. Remember also that they let some people go. They let some people also go to farm and decided to come into the cities. And they're trying to deal with students of secondary school, and sometimes trying to leverage on women, on ladies, on girls. And you see, already we have an issue of lack of interest in seeking for knowledge from our small children, particularly the female type. And so it is true that these bandits have an idea as to who is their next target. And that's what they do. And so it means that they are aware. It means that they don't go hunting. And therefore, we must take a step. The government must ensure that they strengthen the intelligence of the security forces up to the rural areas. We must also know that this forest must also be taken care of. We used to have what we call Operation Sharandaje, and all the Northwest government brought together security agencies and the police, and they were combing these bushes. We need to go into this forest. We need to go in there and see what is happening. Without that, it won't work. We must have intelligence that will enable us to break through into where these people are. Otherwise, they will keep coming and doing what they're doing.
Well, it's a big otherwise that you have just raised there, and there's so much to discuss along that line. But let's take a short break for a few messages, Mr. Abila. When we come back, we'll take on more of these angles. Thanks for staying with us. Well, Mr. Abila, the issues are right there in front of us right now. And one of the things that we have also heard about this, I don't know if it is something you would want to also confirm, that the diversion tactic, so to speak, or the art of deception, some have said, which is one of the strategies of war, was engaged, in this new abduction of the Jangebe girls. Now, that is definitely something that would give one concern, because while contending with one, another one was going on the other end. And in all of these, one again would ask the question, is it a failure of intelligence or absence of it?
I think we better say this absence of intelligence, because I don't think we've leveraged on a very robust intelligence. There's also an ungoverned space. I've said it here before that the police have completely been relegated. The funding is not there, and we've been able to also take them out from the rural areas. We used to have police posts where even movement of criminals, those criminal elements in the small community, almost identified by these police officers. But you see, we've concentrated in the city, and we've not been able to provide enough, and then spread and get more police and spread them out, who will also enlist the support of the communities wherever they find themselves, so that we can leverage. You can imagine the Zamfara on, that they came in midnight, and they went in and spent a lot of time, and also went in with vehicles, and they were ordering these children into the vehicles. You could imagine the kind of time and the relaxation they had to be able to evacuate them. So we need to do something quickly. I think there's absence of intelligence. And also there are a lot of ungoverned space that we've left and it's telling us on the face.
Yesterday, we saw the Commissioner of Police in Zamfara State, saying that he's been combing the forest areas and, looking for these girls that have been abducted. In terms of moving these girls, a lot of people are thinking, if you are talking about 300 people, how many vehicles would you need to move such people? That number of school children. And that brings me to the question of, is there something missing in terms of, because in these areas we have the security operatives that are supposed to be around to ensure that some of this kind of attacks don't happen. Does it mean that there was complete absence of some of the security operatives that should have been along the way?
Yes, most of the activities by the security agencies, whether the military or the police or those in charge of intelligence, is reactive. We do not have the ability, if you go to Zamfara. I've been to Zamfara. I've used the helicopter. I've also used patrol vehicle for weeks and weeks and weeks. It's very, very difficult to dominate the kind of forest we have in Zamfara. Spanning from that Kagara, from the Kagara in Niger State, there's a forest, forestry area that span through what we call Nansadao up to Bokium, and the whole of that area. And so it's not possible to be able to place policemen, and policemen or any security agents would have not known that there is going to be this incident, and then you now send them. Where they are, these criminals avoid them. They structure their roads in a way that they will not come face to face with the police. And that's why we're saying that bringing in ideas of trying to look at the kind of security personnel we have, to build their capacity, and to be able to also ensure that there are more of them. And doing that, that's why we're talking about bringing in the communities, enlisting their support, working with them. They will be able to pick piece of information. If we have a lot of them that work with the police, right in that area, wherever they are going, someone is likely to see when they come in and when they are going out, and he will alert the police. Not doing that will let the public support these criminals, because sometimes they have a part in it. They're very generous to them. Sometimes they also, I think, woo them up into their side. And that's why when they pick these people and when they go in a long distance with vehicles and the rest of it, nobody reports. And this is the gap that I think is not quite encouraging.
Okay, so there was the call for the replacement of the service chiefs. And, of course, that has been done. And significantly, the very day that the service chiefs were being confirmed or screened at the National Assembly was when the Kagara boys abduction or the school abduction happened. If you have any word for the service chiefs this morning, what would it be in terms of, nipping some of these attacks in the bud?
Okay, yes, I have opportunity in my service to work very closely with the service chiefs and the military officers. I'm sure a lot of them know me. We plan operation together, and we go out there, whether it's in Boniadi, in Yobe, or it is Operation Lafia Dole in Meduguri, and then a lot of it in Benue. They know. And I think I've represented the police, and they also have worked with us. What I should say now is that these criminal elements want to demonstrate that you can change the service chiefs, and we're going to go ahead with this. They're just trying to make some careless statement that nobody is going that the changes will not affect their criminal activities. And so I believe that the service chiefs that are out from their outburst and from what they've been saying, I think they must be on the drawing board now. And like I said, this operation Sharandaje, all of them, all security agencies must move into this forest and comb the forest. Okay. To wait to react, it might be late.
Even though a good number of people are also wondering, okay, so if we know where these criminals are and we have reports of people having conversations with them, why have we not picked them up? But all of that we can leave to another day for the same conversation. But we'll have to thank you very much right now, retired Deputy Inspector General of Police, Joshua Kapila. Thank you so much for your time and your thoughts this morning.
Thank you for having me. Thank you. Thank you.
All right, so we are back in a moment for more. Something completely different. Stay with us.
Welcome back. So it's talk around coronavirus. I'm sure many Nigerians will wish that we weren't marking this kind of day because, but it's a pandemic. It's global. It's landed in Nigeria just exactly 1 year ago.
Exactly 1 year ago. And many people, many countries would also have their own days. China would have theirs. Italy would have theirs. America would have theirs as well.
And that day would afford, give the opportunity of looking back and saying, how well have we been able to tackle this? But before then, let's see some of the figures. It was just a case on the 27th of February 2020. But so far, right now, we have over 155,000 confirmed cases in Nigeria, exactly 155,075. And then the recoveries, thankfully, 132,566. That is at this morning.
And you would also recognize that, even though it's just a year, we've since that year tested 1.5 almost 1.5 million samples that have been tested, samples that have been collected for testing. Of course, you can see the figures are shy of...
And tested.
Yes, and tested.
Even though, of course, in some other African countries, they've done, quite a number, but this is what we have so far. But if we go back to the second slide, you see there that in terms of the number of fatalities, it's sad that we have 1,902 people lost to this virus. It may look very tiny if you look at that slide, but this is not just about number. It's about people. Imagine 100 people, then imagine 200, imagine 1,000 people, and now 1,902 lost.
Added to that, the number of lives that are connected to these fatalities. The individuals that have died as a result.
And of course, among all of these people are health workers, frontline health workers who, of course, we're trying to ensure that all of us are safe, and those that have contracted the disease have been treated and managed properly.
Well, you can see that the larger area in red represents the number of people who have recovered, from the disease so far, and it comes about...
And that's recoveries from both at the isolation center and those that were treated at home.
At least the figures that the NCDC has, 85.5% of all confirmed cases. We also recognize that there are a number of states that are where we have Lagos, the most cases.
Yes, Lagos, FCT, Plateau, Kaduna, and Oyo states. And of course, we also have the states with the least numbers. Maybe this may not just be a question of the least affected, because it's a question of how many or how much of testing was done in these states. But there you can see it. But we have this morning with us on the program the Director General of the Center for Disease Control, Dr. Chikwe Ihekweazu. Thank you so much for being with us this morning.
Thank you, colleagues. It's great to be on your show again on this very important day.
Yes.
Asade.
Great to have you. How has the journey been so far? We weren't looking at, when it started, we had the first case, and we say we have 2 cases, and we say we have 50 cases, and then we have over 155 cases.
Yes, when I remember this day exactly a year ago, the night before, we had a few series of tests that turned out negative over the weeks preceding. And then this, on the day before today, a year ago, this astute clinician in Ogun State recognized the risk in a patient that had come back from Europe with symptoms, flu-like symptoms, and actually clicked that this might be COVID-19, and actually decided to take a sample. And then a series of events led to that sample being tested at the Lagos University Teaching Hospital by Professor Milabu and his group, excellent virologist. Once that result looked like it was turning positive, he called me that evening and continued to work. I alerted the Honorable Minister of Health that we might be facing our first case. Once that was confirmed later that evening, together with a small team, we worked through the night to prepare the press statement that was then announced to Nigerians on the morning of the next day, explaining what exactly had happened and the fact that we now had a first case. If you remember, the country really pulled together and did a fairly good job in managing that individual. And I think there was only one secondary case from that individual. But the reality is that at the time, our airports were still open, people were still traveling. We really did not understand as much as we do now about the virus, about transmission, about the need for masks and all of that. So we're really shooting in the dark. So that led to this pandemic growing in Nigeria, just like it spread around the world. And we've been on top of this since then. For the past 365 days, the team at NCDC and public health workers at the state level, hospitals, port health services, everyone has been working around the clock to mitigate the impact of this virus and this pandemic in Nigeria. So to your question, where do I think we are? You know, I feel a bit like a child that was going to school, and everyone thought that the child would fail outright, fail out of school, and flunk out. And at the end of the day, you try, you struggle, you pull your resources, you work hard at night, you read, and you're third or fourth in the class. Yes, you're not top of the class because, you know, there's some resources that were not available to you to be the best you can possibly be. But I think today we can look at ourselves as a country and say we made the very best use of our available resources within a very difficult context. You know, 36 plus 1 states in Nigeria, all who have to be pulled along into this response. You know, a public sector that is often derided for not being able to hold its own, coming together, delivering a response. So I think today really is a day of reflection for me and really for the rest of my team on the year behind us, but also a day to re-energize, knowing that, you know, we still have a long way to go. So we've got to kind of gather our resources and make sure we continue not to let Nigerians down and sustain the response until we really see a radical reduction in cases and get this pandemic under control.
Well, looking back now, since you say it's a day of reflection, perhaps it might not be a bad idea to look back indeed and say, wait a minute. So that's the position we took. That was our approach. Looking back, is there anything we could have done differently to reduce the numbers? Yes, it is bad, but it could have been worse. But this is what we have on our hands. Looking back, by way of reflection, as you said, you and your team, is there anything we could have done to stem the tide, to reduce the number of infections and fatalities? For instance, you also talked about, just a moment, you also talked about the fact that at that time, we hadn't closed our airspace, you know, flights from coming in and all of that. I mean, of course, that wasn't, you know, well, that was not a decision for you to make. But looking back, what are the things we could have done differently?
Well, thanks. You know, I think even I'd look further back than just the year. You know, this is looking back at 60 years of nation building and how we place health security and public health in our national discourse and how seriously we take epidemic preparedness and the investment in it. You know, for many years, we've been soliciting for the resources to build up our defenses, to build preparedness, to train the individuals that we need to do this work, to build the scientists, to recruit the virologists. You know, all of this takes resources. And in a country where there is a constraint in resources, you know, this never really rose up the national agenda. And, you know, sometimes it felt like we were accused of prying wool, you know. So really, to look back, the lesson I hope we can learn from this is, you know, you don't prepare for a fire when your house is ablaze. The work that we have to do to prepare for the future starts now. We live in a country of where we're growing, our population is growing at 3% per annum in the middle of the tropics, very difficult socioeconomic conditions. The fact is, Ayo, we will be faced with more emerging infectious diseases. Absolutely we will in the future. Okay. The challenge, what do we do now to prepare for these events when they happen? Because, you know,
just a moment. You have referenced 60 years back, and there were some practices we had then which we seem to have dropped. We'll take a look at them in a moment when we return. A quick look at the Nigeria historically in terms of health security that you mentioned, Dr. Ihekuazu. One wonders what happened to some of those preventive practices that we had. For instance, the local government system was so strong they had environmental sanitation officers, environmental sanitation officers. In Yoruba land, we call them wole wole. They went to each person's house to see how clean their homes were in order to forestall some of these communicable diseases that you talked about. So if you are going to go there, is there anything we have lost along that line? Clearly, those practices aren't there anymore. Is there a way, do you think, that some of these things can be brought back? Because just as you said, we will have such epidemics as we have now. If it happens again, and with those practices are not afoot, there could be a problem, isn't it?
You're absolutely right. You know, at the beginning of this outbreak, I remember we were, advocating, this is an example, advocating for hand washing, right? And so we went around a few schools and we realized that, listen, most schools in Nigeria, most public schools don't have hand washing facilities. So, this is not a problem NCDC can solve. In times past, politics used to be around advocating for water. People providing drinking water used to be an election issue. Now everybody is digging his own borehole and nobody is talking about how do we provide a good public water resources available. So, it's really a difficult situation that we have to confront way beyond what is possible in just the health sector or just NCDC. We really have to think about what matters in life. And really that's what today is about. How do we prepare all of our society for the threat of infectious diseases? Among all the other threats that we face, how do we provide clean water? How do we get rid of, stagnant water and prevent mosquitoes? How do we prevent diseases like TB that are still happening in Nigeria? Measles. We're talking about a vaccine to COVID, and everyone is excited about the date to get the COVID vaccine. We have diseases like measles for which there have been vaccines for the past 40, 50 years. And still, we're still having measles outbreaks in Nigeria, cases of measles, because for different reasons, we're not getting our children immunized to diseases for which we've had vaccines for the past 50 years. So I think there's an all of society renewal of consciousness that is necessary in terms of what we need to do collectively to protect ourselves from the things that we can't protect ourselves against, so that we use the energy that is necessary during pandemics for those things that are new and we have to learn quickly on. So I completely agree with you. And if you think about the role that you mentioned at the local government level, as you know, this is linked with the almost failure of local government leadership in Nigeria, which is, again, another complex issue way beyond what I'm able to speak about. But these are things somehow we had, somehow we lost. And I think to regain the status that we desire our country to have, we have to rethink how we deal with the basics of water, the basics of sanitation. And that's the only way we can really prevent the transmission of infectious diseases, so that the work people do at NCDC is really limited to the absolute emergencies where there are new viruses, where there's insufficient knowledge on what to do at the very beginning.
What you have said now further underscores what the PTF COVID-19 chairman said as well about the state of health infrastructure in the country. And clearly, some work has been done in that regard. But how significant is what has been done in shoring up our health infrastructure across the 36 states of the country or across the region, whichever one, the PTF COVID-19 is enabled or empowered to effect any change in, given, as you said, if we are able to do this now, we are literally preparing ourselves against another outbreak.
Yes, when the chair of the PTF, who is also the secretary to the government of the Federation, Mr. Boss Mustafa, made this statement he made at National Assembly, for which a certain part of the media criticized him. He really showed his honesty and integrity in delivering his leadership to the PTF. And he has encouraged all of us to be honest and open with what we see in order that we can start a journey of rehabilitation. And he has said this in every press conference he has led on, over 70 of them since the beginning of this pandemic, openly communicating with people that this is our reality. This is the state of our health sector. This is the consequence of the underinvestment in years. Now, what are we going to do? In the areas that we lead on at NCDC, we've already spoken about the almost this is almost a miracle in terms of what has happened to laboratory infrastructure across the country, and not just what NCDC is doing. Just yesterday, the Ondo State government opened a new molecular lab that they had built themselves. The same is happening across the country, where we are invited to then support, not build. We have supported many of these. And so that whole landscape, that whole area is unrecognizable from where it was a year ago. Is it sufficient for a country of 200 million? Absolutely not. Many of our states have 2-3 big cities and lots of rural areas. Right now, a lot of the facilities are limited to the state capital. So there's a lot of work to be done. But, if I think about just the National Reference Lab in Gadua in the outskirts of Abuja, and where we were 1 year ago, and where we are now, and the energy, the enthusiasm, the spirit of the people working there every single day. Our big challenge, Ayo, is how we sustain this into the future, and to make sure that the investments that we have made in health infrastructure and health security this year lives way beyond the outbreak, so that when COVID-19 is no longer a topic for sunrise on channels, that people still remember that there's important work happening in the background. And actually, the success of that work is when it is done quietly without media attention, but the rest of the country can sleep at night knowing that there are a group of people working hard that have the resources, equipment, reagents they need to keep all of us safe. And that's the future I wish for our country. And that's really what we're working hard to achieve at NCDC.
It's interesting you mentioned sustainability of some of this infrastructure being put in place, because I remembered when Ebola came in 2014 and some of the things that were put in place, and then COVID-19 came in 2020, and some people were saying we were not so prepared for it. In terms of maintenance, how are you working with some of the states and, for instance, these molecular labs that have been set up? I know that when Ebola came, we were just having, I think, about 2 or 3 or thereabout, and we have over, I think, 60, 70 right now. What are we doing in terms of ensuring that these laboratories are, continue to be maintained in a way that if there's any other thing that we need to take care of, we don't have to start from the scratch?
So thanks. The question really is, how do we perceive outbreaks? People think about outbreaks like, especially because of the Ebola experience, that's something that comes and goes, and everyone gets back to work. And so if we change our thinking about the threat posed from outbreaks, not to things that come and go, but to existing threats, and that success is actually when you limit those cases to a small number, it will really change the way we think about it. Now, what are we doing about it ourselves at NCDC? What we're doing is build up, the hardest thing. You might think that the hardest thing is to build and to buy equipment because they're expensive. The hardest thing is actually to build the human resources, the scientists, because that takes time. And even with X million US, you cannot build up an expert scientist in a few days or weeks. It requires time. So what we're doing really is to build up the caliber of scientists. Just 3 weeks ago, we had the first collection of 20 colleagues from across the country. We brought them to Abuja. They went through a hands-on training for 2 weeks into the very difficult skills. These are already experts, but bringing them together, and we're planning to do more cohorts of this. Right now, we're doing our first quality assurance panel. So this is a panel of tests that will be sent around the country to see which labs are able to identify the positives as positive and negatives as negative out of a predefined panel. That's the first time we're doing that in Nigeria for COVID-19. The panel is being prepared ourselves. So these are very complex processes. Our need is for our leadership to really recognize the threat that we have and invest in health security. And my mandate really as the leader of this organization is to convince my minister, convince the head of state that this is an existential requirement for our country, that as much as it's important, and we all know it's important to invest in bridges, to invest in infrastructure and security and power, We need all of these things. But the first thing we need is health. And we need to protect our lives. And in order to do that from the threat of infectious diseases, we need to increase just a little bit the investments that we have to make in ensuring that the group of people in every state in Nigeria with the skills, resources, access to equipment, and just ability to go to a local government and investigate a case of an unknown illness. If you're told that there's a small cluster of cases somewhere in an LGA, and you're told at the state, as a state epidemiologist, and you don't have fuel in your car to go to take a sample from that individual, you can have the best lab in the world. But if you're not able to deploy a resource at the time it is needed, that infection will get to the next person, get to the next person. At some point, it's a story in the media, and people wondering what happened. What happened is that somebody did not have 10,000 naira to put fuel in his vehicle to go and investigate the first case. And that's why health security is much more complex than many people understand. And it's the reason why we really need to come together as a country, recognize this as a priority, and build towards sustainability in our response. My final word on this is, the work we have done in Nigeria over the last year, really, we need to, it has been recognized around the world. People often think that, everything in Nigeria we are unable to hold our own together. So today and this week is really around understanding what has gone well, learning those lessons, and making sure we can use those lessons and build for a better future for our country.
Okay, let's talk more about what has gone well. Okay, when this started, there was the talk around PPEs not being adequate, not being enough, frontline health workers being exposed, and all of that. What information do you have around the country concerning some of this?
Yes, this has been such a huge lesson for us. I remember at the beginning of this outbreak, we had a stockpile of PPEs, 2 rooms full of these things. When these things happen, you never imagine that there'll be a time where airports will be shut. You imagine that if you need things, you can always procure. But we quickly realized that, listen, we were in for a real challenge. We had a small stockpile, nowhere close to what we needed. The access was closed. So, we used all sorts of resources available to us. The one I want to mention, the 2 I want to mention here is how the UN came together. The United Nations and their various agencies in Nigeria, WHO, UNICEF, WAHO, the Africa CDC, and came together collectively to make a plan for the continent and support us. So this is not really about money, because at that time, even with resources, you couldn't purchase because there was no entry point, right? So they came together, supported us through what they call the UN Basket Fund. The other collaborative that came together was organized private sector in Nigeria. The private sector gets a lot of flack a lot of times, but really, and very often they're disorganized, but this time they came together. And the impact they had on people like myself was that instead of discussing with 15 different companies all looking to be in front of the queue, they came together as one group, PACOVID, and said, listen, what can we do for you collectively? And we agreed on a plan. They supported us with procurement and delivery of a lot of the reagents we used to the last mile. And thirdly is what the federal government itself did through the Presidential Task Force and enabling the resources available to make those procurements. So, if you listen hard, when good things happen, no one hears about it. For the last few months, you would not have heard anywhere in the media on a stock out of PPEs anywhere in the country. Those stories have more or less disappeared. They've disappeared because every month we have sustained a supply chain across Nigeria. All 36 plus 1 states have received a significant amount of PPEs every single month. It goes to the state and to the federal teaching hospitals or FMCs across this country. We've not missed a single month. Of course, this doesn't provide all the supplies in the states. The states still make their own procurements in addition. But this whole supply chain is now fluid. We have data to show exactly what has been procured, exactly where it has gotten to. And this is why we've sustained the supply chain of PPEs. But PPEs, remember, on their own, don't save lives. Yeah. What saves lives is when you use it appropriately and understand the role it plays. So it's a whole area of work we call infection prevention and control that includes PPEs, but also includes training capacity and all the other aspects.
Okay. What then would you say in this past 1 year is, the biggest challenge that you've had to face?
I think the biggest challenge we've had is really the size and complexity of our dear country, right? The sustaining anything you're doing is very hard to move the needle because the country is big, and success means that you have a functional lab in every state and sometimes many more. And, it doesn't matter sometimes that you're 95% successful. You're criticized for not hitting the last 5%. So what we've done is diligently keep our heads low, focus on the task at hand. Every week, if you follow us carefully, you'll hear the announcement of a new lab opened somewhere across this big country. So our country is difficult, it's big, it's challenging to get around. So this requires constant engagement. But, big problems require big solutions. And we have a determined team that understand the responsibility and the trust Nigerians have placed on them. And every week, every Saturday, Sunday, you come to the reference lab, you see people working. You come to our warehouse, you see people packing up PPEs to be sent across the country. You see people looking at data, making sure that every single night throughout the last year, we have announced data to Nigerians unfailingly. We stopped for 3 days during the SARS outbreaks, not because we didn't have the data, but because we wanted to kind of respect the mood of the country. So this is an amazing example of a public sector delivery of a response. And I think something to learn for, even as we reflect on this 1 year of the response today.
Dr. Ihekazu, earlier you mentioned, or at least you kind of referenced the effect or otherwise of the political leadership, of the understanding of the peculiarity of the challenges we have on our hands countrywide, especially in terms of health security. Now, over the past 1 year, have we been able to, as you said, move the needle of their understanding of these existential risks, which, if not dealt with as and when due, could put us in a lot more dire straits than we found ourselves in the past 1 year?
I honestly think that's one of the successes of this. We have a subgroup in the PTF that meets a subgroup of the Nigerian Governors Forum every 2 weeks. We have a 2-hour Zoom meeting. This subgroup is led by His Excellency Governor Kowa in Delta State. There are about 7 governors in that meeting. When we started having these meetings, I thought their energy would wane and eventually become disinterested in this. But, every 2 weeks, this group is convened. There are very stringent minutes. I am asked very hard questions. I have to provide answers together with other members of the PTF. Were interrogated around details, a number of labs, reagents, vaccines, So the level of engagement with the Nigerian Governors Forum really has surprised me pleasantly in terms of the ability to understand the details and contribute to it. So, I do think we've made a dent, and I do think something has shifted. And why is this the case? I think everyone recognized that despite the numbers, the big thing that happened last year was the disruption in the economy and the impact that had on our earnings, on our way of life, on our ability to govern. And once there's a threat that not only causes a public health threat, but causes a threat to the economy and its ability to function, And I think that's really what clicked across leadership, not just in Nigeria, but around the world. And the world has now come together increasingly so to learn on how to quickly mitigate the impact of this. So we don't have to use blunt instruments like lockdown anymore.
Just one quick one, Dr. Ihekweazu. Pardon me for jumping in on this. In this conversation with the subgroups that you talked about now, has it come up, to strengthen the health infrastructure at the local government levels so that these environmental sanitation officers that we talked about can help to nip these other issues that you talked about in the bud, measles, Lassa fever, and the rest of them?
So everything has come up, including that, right? When we speak, generally the discussions are compartmentalized into what do we do in the immediate, in the medium term, and in the longer term. So everyone recognizes, in fact, all the governors recognize that they have to rethink the medium and longer term and start thinking about that in their own states. And in fact, in some states, this has actually started happening. And when we say we want to do one lab, they say, no. My state is big. I need 3-4. I need to think about the local government and things like that. So the challenge is that we have an acute and immediate problem at our hand. And a lot of the focus has been getting ahead of the immediate problem. And then I think, and I hope, that a lot of them will really focus on the areas that you've mentioned and you're obviously very passionate about, and rightly so, because you can't manage people's health from the top of the mountain. You have to come down to where they live, the communities, the local governments, the churches, the community groups. And that's really where real public health intervention and community engagement really happens.
Okay, quickly, before we go, Dr. Ihekweazu, where are we concerning the vaccine? Yesterday, there was that news or something that was coming in about vaccine coming into the country. You want to tell us about that?
Well, I think, our sister agency, the National Primary Healthcare Development Agency, is working extremely hard. One thing is about getting the vaccines in. The other thing is about enabling the logistics, the distribution, the cold chain infrastructure around the country, the prioritization of who gets these vaccines first. And all that work has been going on diligently. We're now ready to receive the vaccines. It's public knowledge that about 4 million doses have been are coming in fairly soon. We don't know the exact date because it doesn't depend on us. It depends on the packaging and shipping and the logistics of the colleagues working at COVAX. But they've told us that, listen, Nigeria is a priority and they're working very hard. I think it's a matter of days, not weeks. And so we look forward to receiving those shots very soon. We've seen Ghana and Cote d'Ivoire receive their first allocations. The allocation to Nigeria is over 5 times the allocation to Ghana in the first instance as a result of the size of our population. So it takes a bit longer to put it all together, but we are confident that we'll get these vaccines very soon into our country.
Thank you so much, Dr. Chikwe Ihekweazu, the Director General of the Nigeria Center for Disease Control, for coming on this day to talk to us about the journey so far in handling COVID-19 in Nigeria. Thank you once more.
Thank you for having me, and have a good weekend.
You too. Okay, so we'll take another quick break. When we come back, we'll be talking about downstream sector. Stay with us.
Thank you for staying with us on Sunrise this morning. Well, the debate is still on within the oil industry for a move to deregulate the downstream sector, and that conversation doesn't seem to be going away anytime soon.
Yeah, because when it comes to petrol prices and allied matters, people are very, very concerned.
Especially of the allied matters. Well, some players in the sector are looking at the costs, short and long-term effect of the venture. Others are assessing the impact on the economy. So, joining us for an assessment of the downstream sector deregulation is Mr. Ademola Adigun, who is an oil and gas governance and development consultant, and he's been doing this for more than 17 years. He joins us from our studio in Abuja. Thank you so much, Mr. Adigo, for joining us this morning. Perhaps we should begin with, first of all, where are we? I mean, there's a whole lot of confusion about whether or not we are in the full deregulation regime, or we're still inching into it or ebbing into it. What's your assessment of where we are right now?
Good morning. Thank you very much. We're on the pathway towards there. We're not there yet. We started the journey last year, but we are not there yet. So first thing is to announce removal of subsidy. Next is to regulate properly. So what we've done right now is start the journey, but we haven't completed the process. I mean, as of today, we still have marketers playing a major role. We still have issues around price fixing. We don't have template structures to use and guidance. So there's some issues still, but we're on the pathway there.
Well, the natural question then would be, so what's this what has it cost us over the years to regulate the downstream sector of the nation's oil and gas?
The cost is enormous. I mean, we essentially, from the time we started subsidy, became an oil exporting nation. You know, like, let me take an example. You know, if you buy a tuber of yam and all you do is sell the yam, the only value you get is from selling the yam. Now, if you buy a tuber of yam and you dice the yam, you fry the yam, you're likely to make more money. If you buy the yam, you pound the yam and sell pounded yam, you make more money. Now, if you take your crude every day and put it on ships and go abroad, you're not making any value. There's an opportunity cost for every barrel of crude you sell that you don't add value to in country. So if a barrel of crude is $50, just for, I mean, let's say now it's $63, the incremental loss in dollars for not refining it is about $1,648. So what it costs us is enormous in terms of efficiency, in terms of growth. What it costs us to the economy in terms of what we've not been able to provide. I mean, let me tell you right now. Right now, we're doing 1.9 billion a week on subsidies. 1.9 billion to 2.1 billion every week on subsidies. Imagine what that could do to the economy. Imagine at the critical time when we're suffering losses from low exports, suffering losses from production values, what we could do with that. In how many jobs we could create. I mean, you don't create jobs in the upstream. The upstream is a very limited sector because it's a technologically efficient sector. And any sector that has technology efficiency is not a job creation sector. So where you want to put your effort is saying, how do you move resources to a place where you can add more value, create more jobs, allow more growth of the sector, allow you to be the key player in West Africa. So let's take a scenario. If, for instance, we were supplying West Africa products, during the lockdown and during times when oil came to $36, $37, our revenues will have been significant. We have 4 refineries now, not working. We have about 2,000 staff there, not doing anything, not because they can't make it happen, but because we have a complicated market structure where we are just taking crude and exporting it. No country that has that kind of potentials that doesn't use it can be an oil sector company. What you're just is just a primary export producer. And in every market, whether it's oil, whether it's agriculture, once you are at the primary stage, your value gain is low, your resources are low, your revenues are very, very low as well.
Okay, so I'm sure you're aware of the meeting between the federal government and Labour, concerning fuel pricing and all of that. And from that meeting, we understand that the federal government is saying, really, we can't continue with subsidy. And Labour, on the other hand, is saying, this is not the time to put more burden on Nigerians. Do you think, this time, okay, so the country is just exiting, recession. Is this the right time for Nigeria, the federal government, to cash in on this and, completely deregulate the downstream sector?
Well, there are 2 perspectives to this. We have never had the right time since 1974. Since 1974, after the Yom Kippur War, there's never been the right time. Every government has tried to stop subsidy. Every government, starting from the military regimes down to the Shagari regime, down to Buhari, thanks to Babangida, down to everybody. The right time has never happened. Now, yes, the middle class and the country is bearing a lot of burden now. It's tough for everybody. But the question is, can the country survive? A lot of states can't pay salaries. They can't pay the minimum wage. A lot of states can't provide any infrastructure. A lot of states can't do any capital project. Nigeria is going to borrow about 38.7% of the budget this year. That's a significant amount of money. When you compare that with how much we're spending, we will never have the right time to afford it. I mean, what Labour Union should be talking about is how can we afford it? What do we do to cushion the effect of it? What can we do to make it happen? Because it's a no-win situation as it is. You can't continue doing this and spend 2.1 billion every week. And it might go higher depending on FX values. So you keep on spending that. You go back to the system where we're in debt, we have no oil sector anymore, we have no economy anymore, then there's no union. So right now, a lot of states are struggling to keep their staff, very struggling not to pay, not to sack people or get them out of jobs. But there is a challenge. The right time won't come. The right time won't be anytime soon. It is hard now, but I think the conversation should be, okay, now we need to do this. How do we do it? How do we make sure that when we do it, people don't suffer too much? How do we we have to take away the thinking of petrol as different from every product. Everything has increased in the last 5 years. Everything. Everything from bread to school fees to yam to tomato to pepper to onions. Why do you think one product should stay static? So I'm not saying that there is no pain. I'm not recognizing those issues. But we have to come to the point where we say, look, there's no right time. There's no right time to treat an ailment. There's no right time to not have an injection. There's no right time not to make things happen. We've gone beyond all this, and the discussions are the same. We've had discussions for the past. Starting from me, remember the protests we had under Jonathan, where everybody was on the street? It's still the same issues. The economy can't absorb it. It's either we collapse as an economy or we do the right thing.
Well, the challenge perhaps, Mr. Adigun, would be messaging this to Nigerians so they can understand and embrace and own it. Because our realities are very stark. Just as you said, prices of everything goes up. Absolutely everything. Including that of pump price of petrol. It goes up. And people say, hardly does it ever come down. Very rarely does it come down in Nigeria. Mm-hmm. But then, there's also been the talk over and over again about deregulating the downstream sector 100%. Perhaps the challenge then would be messaging this to people so that they own the process. What do people gain? What do people benefit from deregulating the downstream sector?
The obvious one is actually efficiency, which is the first thing to say. Right now, there's no efficiency in the market. You see, right now, we have a major importer importing it. We have strain on our FX. We, in a way, subsidize the foreign exchange for import. We subsidize cost of distribution and a lot of things. So the first gain to everybody is efficiency. Now, yes, petroleum products can go up and go down. In the last 2 years, it has gone up and down. We've had time when it's gone down. We've had times it's gone up. But it's a factor of the cost of crude. So if crude prices keep on going up and your FX goes up as it's gone up, the two factors affect the retail price of petrol. Diesel today is 250. Last week, it was 225. Kerosene, which the poor actually use, has gone up by over 48% in the last 8 months. Nobody has died from that. Now, but there's an emotional attachment to petrol. Now, we don't have jobs. We don't have jobs in the country in the upstream. The upstream employs less than 200,000 people in total. You can't create jobs from an upstream. But the downstream has things. People think of downstream only as petrol. Downstream regulation covers the whole gamut of refining, petrochemicals, and such, where you can add value and income to the country. The most essential part of it is we save a lot of money we can use for other things. 1.1 billion, 1.9 billion, 2.1 billion every week is substantial money that can go anywhere. Now, I understand the challenges of Nigerians and lack of trust because we've been this route over a lot of times. And every time we talk about deregulation, we come back and say, oh, the savings. And I've always said to people in government, you can't save money you didn't plan for. Savings mean I plan to spend 10 naira, I spent 7 naira. That's a saving. But when you have no plan to spend 10 naira and you spend 30 naira, if you stop spending 30 naira, there's no savings. So every time you tell them, oh, the savings will be plowed back, there's no savings when you deregulate, you move subsidies. When you stop subsidizing a product, you're not saving any money because there's no expenditure plan for it. What you're doing is cutting waste. So there will be gains in jobs, there will be gains in efficiency, there will be gains in growth. There might be times when petrol price will go down. It's everywhere in the world. I mean, anybody that studies the pattern, if you take any economy, it goes like this, depending on the price of crude and other factors. So it's going to be tough. It's going to be challenging, but we need to create jobs. We need to have an efficient downstream sector. We need to have an oil industry in Nigeria. Right now, I don't call what we have an oil industry. I call us a crude exporting economy. That's not an oil industry. We need to, I mean, this crude one day will be over. It's going to always be here. In a few years' time, maybe give it 30, 35 years. I mean, Nigeria has a very substantial amount of crude, but the market will have moved on. The crude won't be the real thing anymore, but we can continue a market on other things. So we have to think about the future. What should we tell the children tomorrow when we say, oh, we had crude 30 years ago? What will they see? So we need to move away from this emotional attachment of saying, well, petrol is this. Yes, it's going to be tough. Everything is tough. But again, it's a tough time for the economy, not due to anybody's fault. COVID came. The economy contracted, all not because, I mean, we have several security concerns ongoing in the country. The macro issues beyond our world. We live in a world where everybody is impacted by things everywhere. Now we're having a rise in the economy. The price of crude is rising higher. That's going to impact low cost here. And one of the issues I always hear people say, oh, fix the refineries. Well, the refineries being fixed will not solve the problem of price. I mean, everybody keeps on saying, oh, well, if you fix a refinery, then maybe it won't change anything, because refineries are not very high profit industries. The highest return you can get on a refinery is maybe 1.3, 1.78%. So if you refine locally, the only thing you save is freight cost. Freight cost today, maybe on a liter, 2 naira 40 kobo. Doesn't change anything substantially. Maybe it does. But then again, there's so many other things that also create efficiency. So it's complicated. But there are gains. There are gains in terms of the savings we will do, the less pressure on our reserves, the less pressure on our economy, the removal of corruption. Corruption is a big deal. I mean, we had that time when we had the Agimokode report. We had all the reports on the subsidy issues. What has happened to them? So we can't continue that system. It's a complicated structure.
Okay, I'm glad you mentioned the fact that there's this lack of trust between the people and, those in leadership in terms of, okay, so if we remove the subsidy, we are going to use the money for instance, to build roads and all of that. But if you have to talk about the messaging, as Ayo mentioned earlier, and you meet, for instance, with the leadership of the NLC and TUC and other labor unions, what exactly would you be telling them, for them to, perhaps key into this and see the benefits that you've outlined?
Well, ironically, we've done a lot of engagement with labor unions and other trade unions in the last 8-9 years. And the message has always been saying we need to all think about the country first. What is the country? The country needs to exist before you have labor unions. Second message is to say, look, there are no savings. I mean, that is where I think distortion comes from. Whenever government says there are savings, the question is from what? Savings come from you have a budget for something, you didn't spend it. Savings don't happen when you don't have a budget for something and you spend money you don't have. What you are not doing is not saving money. What you're doing is cutting waste. So there are no savings to spend on anything else because there's no money for it. I mean, there were savings. Why would you be borrowing money at the rate we're borrowing money? I mean, the Minister of Finance said we're still going to borrow more money. She's being truthful. We need to borrow more money to sustain the economy. Now, the question is what we borrow the money for. When you use the money on subsidies, you are consuming. You know, imagine taking a loan from the bank to establish an industry. Then you now take the loan and use it to eat. You can't pay back the loan. You don't have anything to show for the loan, and the loan is still there. That's what subsidies are. Subsidies are consuming both today, tomorrow, and the future. And we're subsidizing beyond Nigeria. I mean, NNPC in the last 4 or 5 years has ensured that products availability. They've done a good job ensuring that we don't queue anymore. But it has been at a significant cost to the economy. The cost of ensuring no queues has been a burden on even NNPC's efficiency and the ability to even deliver for Nigeria. Even on the fact that people don't forget that NNPC manages these assets on behalf of the country and should make revenues for sharing. Now, if NNPC spends a lot of money that's meant for all of us on subsidizing something that not all of us benefit from, it is an issue. The second thing I always tell people is that subsidies are a middle class benefit. That gets people angry when I tell them that, it's middle class. Well, the more cars you have, the bigger your engines are, the more you enjoy subsidy. I mean, if I have a V8, enjoy more subsidy than if guy that has a machine who has a very small 1-liter engine. So it's that kind of thing. And you see, what has happened with electricity now? Let me talk about electricity now, for instance. As price of electricity tariffs have gone up, we've become more adept at managing the way we use electricity. Everybody's now more conscious. We've all switched into light efficiency bulbs. We now put off lights. We now think about all these things. That will happen with the removal. Now, with labor unions, the first key thing is saying, how do you expect governments to pay salaries? How do you expect them to be able to sustain recurrent expenditures? As I speak today, most state governments spend 90% of the money they receive from the federal government on salaries. IGR-generated revenues are such at low levels. So there's a challenge.
Well, clearly there is a challenge, and if there is anything that I'm taking away from this conversation, is that your analogy of taking a loan from a bank just to go have a meal. How am I going to pay it back? Huge one there, but we have to thank you at this time for throwing some light on this conversation on deregulation of the downstream sector in Nigeria. Ademola Henry Adigun is an oil and gas development consultant. Thank you for your time and your thoughts this morning.
Thank you very much. It's been nice here.
Yeah.
So we are on the last lap of the show, and it's that time, you know, when we just relax a bit and have some fun.
After your cocoa or cocoa?
Okay. So we have a good girl in the house. Good girl Ellie. You saw her picture? Good girl Ellie. We're going to get to the bottom of that, you know, good girl part. Yes, we want to know where. But she's actually born Euphemia Rui Ekuma. Thank you so much for being here with us.
Thank you so much for having me.
She's a Nigerian soul singer. Okay,
Performer.
Okay, actress, tell me about the good girl part. I'm interested in knowing.
Well, it's for my real name, actually. You just said it. My real name is Euphemia.
Okay.
And in Greek, that means something that's spoken of well, you know, something that's good reputation. So that's pretty much still good girl. So that's where that came from. That's where the good girl came from.
Okay, and the early part?
And the early was from my first nickname from secondary school, Layden. So all my friends started to call me Ellie, you know. So many people had different meanings for it. Lost Angel, Last Angel, Los Angeles, Lagos. So that's where I adapted that from.
Good girl, Ellie.
Good girl, Ellie.
Very interesting. Why music?
Because this is what I'm best at. This is what I've loved the most since I was a kid, and I've always known I was going to do this. If I wasn't doing this, I don't know what I'd be doing.
Really?
Yeah.
If you weren't doing music, you won't be a good girl? Just asking.
I'd probably be a better girl. Actually.
Okay, so if you were not doing music, you would do nothing?
I'd probably be into fashion and cosmetology, or hospitality, or maybe medicine. Because I have a thing for helping people, for healing people, you know, or like, you know, literally. And I do that now with my music, so I'm still doing that. Mm-hmm. So
is that in any way indicative of what you studied in school?
Yes, I actually was in the Department of Nursing in Calabar, University of Calabar.
Nursing?
Medical surgery.
Very interesting.
So she's now nursing people with her music.
Yeah, so now I'm healing with my music.
Okay, you started music professionally in 2018, you said.
Yes.
Before then, what were you really into, and why wait till 2018, if I can put it that way?
Before then, I was just a normal, you know, young Nigerian child, still in school, but with a passion buried very deep in our heart. So it was just the perfect time, you know, it was just the right time. I had always wanted to do it, but everything was pushing me away from me, but I knew that I wanted to do it. So that particular time, I just decided I'm not going to wait for a big label to come find me. I'm not going to wait for when everything is perfect. I'm going to start where I am. I'm going to use what I have. I'm going to make these songs, find a way to pay for them and upload them. Like when I dropped my first song in 2018, I did it from a cyber cafe myself, just, you know, and I started sharing it on WhatsApp, Facebook, just feeling like someone will see it, someone will like it, on Twitter too, you know, and that's how I got to this point.
And what so far between then and the subsequent one, what's been the response?
amazing. I mean, now I walk into places and people are like, "Hi, good girlie," and I'm like, "Oh, they know me. Okay, it's for real." Yeah. So my dad called me the other time. He said, "Yeah, they said they saw you that on TV. You're moving the name of the community forward." I was like, "Okay, you wouldn't want me to do music before." Yeah.
Because I was actually going to ask about daddy here and mommy. You know, sometimes what stalls, you know, creativity, what stalls vision, what stalls progress in the lives of some other people is that parental rejection of their vision or their ideologies. What was it for you?
Same thing. Same thing, you know now. Because my dad was like, "You're a smart kid. I want you to go to the best schools. I want you to do the course. I want you to, you know, have a scholarship, go to Nigeria and everything." And then I got into school on like first list. You know, it was like, "Hey, you're smart. Why do you want to waste all of this? Why do you want to waste all of this?" So it was just like, he just had to, because it was what I really loved. Even though he really had a problem with it, like it was really, at one point I had to stay away from home for a bit just so I could focus on it, because he was really, you know. But even when I came back, I still did Music School of Nigeria again. So at that point, he was really just like, okay, she really wants to do this, you know, and he just had to.
What was his issue with it?
He had to bulge. His issue with it was, here's the thing, if I'm being real with myself, if I want to tell myself the truth, music is a very selfish career. You cannot do music and do something else. So medicine can't have me. Music is 100%, like, I mean, I don't even have enough time for myself. I can't do another course, something as time demanding also as medicine, you know, as a medical course. So that was his plea. He wanted me to be in that medical line, but I didn't want to be in that line. I wanted to do music.
You were able to hand over the certificate to him?
Because we understand that's what some people say. You wanted me to study medicine? Here's your certificate. I studied it.
But he could not deny it anymore. He knew it was time, and you know, he just had to.
And I guess your mom was in support of you.
My mom is that's where I got my voice from. My mom is a singer. Like, she's a very, very, like, if you hear my mom singing, you probably think, "Oh, she's crying." Her voice is so soulful and like sounds like liquid gold. So that's where I got it from. So my mom understood, because she didn't have this chance that I have now to be able to do this. You know, she wasn't as stubborn as I was. You know, so most of the time when I sing, I feel like I'm doing it for me and for her, because she couldn't do it.
And why
so she understands.
Hip-hop, you know.
Like I said, I got it from my mom. So when I sing, you hear that soul, you hear that emotion. So I got that from my mom. And then I also still listen to a lot of pop music growing up. That's why my music is like a mix. It's still very pop, it's still very boppy, it's still very young. But at the same time, you can hear that I'm an old soul. You can hear that part, that strong emotion, because I got that from my mom.
Now, when one listens to you talk as you're talking now, and they listen to the song that's been sung, that it doesn't seem there is a marriage.
Really?
Of the two.
The tone of my voice or how I talk?
Well, your voice talking is deeper than the singing.
Yeah.
Is that deliberate?
I've always had a husky voice, like, since I could remember.
So why don't you sing with a husky voice? Just
Because here's the thing. I don't like to limit how I make music. When I get in the studio, when I sing, I don't like to, I don't say this is how it has to sound, this is how it has to be. I have a very unique and versatile voice. I could go very high, and I could go, it's still me. So maybe on that song you heard me do, but it's still very much me. And there are songs where people are like, wait, is there someone else on the song? Because there's the low and there's the high. But that's the beauty of me. That's what makes me me. Yeah.
Well, we'll come to that maybe today, maybe some other time in the future. But what's the message that Good Girl LA as a brand represents or seeks to represent?
I think one of the things that I stand for the most is the African girl. You know, the fact that I was able to go against all the odds and still make my dreams happen. I feel like that's a testimony, and that's something that I want to be an inspiration for every African girl out there, because most of the time we're told no. We're told, why are you so ambitious? You know, why do you want to look like this? You need to look like this, you need to be like this, you need to be a good girl.
I'm talking about
but I feel like
look.
my story, my life as a whole, you know, what I'm about is just selling that dream of the African girl, that we actually have dreams. We want to do so much. Like, let us do so much. We're capable of so much. We're focused. Like, it's not what you think.
Okay.
We're focused.
Talking about looks, we'll come back and talk about this, your look. I'm suspecting somebody is a tomboy. We'll be back in a moment. Just stay with us. Welcome back. Good girl, Ellie. I was talking about, you know, your look. Let's talk about it.
Okay.
I would have thought that, you know, as a lady, you know, this kind of ladylike dressing, but tell me about this.
I'm not just going to say anything, right?
Let us say.
My dressing is really fluid. I'm a very fluid person. Like when I like to dress how I feel. I don't like to dress how people think I should dress or what people are expecting me to wear. When I wake up in the morning, sometimes I'm like, okay, am I going to have a long day? Am I going to have what's it going to be like? Is it going to be rough? Is it going to be real calm? Do I want to wear high shoes? Do I want to wear sneakers and just go? So when I wake up and I know, okay, this is what I'm doing today, sometimes that determines how I look. Sometimes I wake up and I'm like, I don't want anyone to see me, or I don't want to, and I just put on a big hoodie and a big shirt and I just go. And there are days where I'm like, okay, today I'm wearing a mini skirt, I'm doing my makeup, I'm wearing the longest lashes, I'm wearing contact lens. Yeah, there are days like that, you know. And when I was growing up, when I was in Calabar, like, over the years, fashion is not just like, oh, I want to put on this. Sometimes it is like a means of, like, it's a mood of survival, literally, because there was this part of Calabar that I stayed in, Anantaga. It's really rough, and there's a lot of, like, bad boys. And when you're coming back in the night, because, like, sometimes I have classes and I have to do 1 or 2 things in town if I get back. So when you're coming back in the night, if you're dressed like a boy, if you're walking like a tout, the guys won't approach you. They won't try to rob you. So I've always learned to hang my bag in front and walk like that. And then I'm slim. I look like a boy from different angles. So they never used to, like, come for me. So that also, like, influenced my style. So I'm very fluid. You see me wear a skirt tomorrow. You never can tell.
That's very interesting. As I said, I'm not going to say anything about that one. But let's not that I don't have anything to say, so don't just. But let's talk about this brand, because we're running out of time now. What's your plan to take Good Girl LA farther, and how far is the plan? I can see that you have some influences in some foreign artists, Michael Jackson, Britney Spears, and all of them. And you're looking to do some collaborations with a few Nigerian artists and all of that. But what do you want this Good Girl LA African girl to represent? How far are you willing to take this brand? 5 years, 10 years from now?
20,
and what are the bottlenecks that you see along the way?
20, 30 years. I plan to sing till I die.
Well,
yes, I plan
I'll
to
be
sing.
singing in my bathroom as well.
I plan to sing to my last breath, but till whenever God decides, I'm just going to keep, you know, making music and giving them the purest form of myself, the purest form of my art, you know, telling my story through the music, because I've been through so much. I'm from this country, I'm from this nation, you know. If anyone can tell the story best, it will be me, because I walked the streets, you know. I have lived life, so I just want to tell my story every day through the song, and I want to take this movement to the whole world. People think they know us as Africans, as African girls, but they don't. And I really want to tell that story that, yo, look, we're ambitious, like, we're out of the box over here.
We can shatter the ceiling.
We got it.
Thank you so much for your time this morning.
Thank you for having
Good Girl
me.
LA.
Thank you so much.
Euphemia.
Yeah.
I like that. Thank you so much, and we wish you all the best.
Thank you.
So that's it. That's it on Sunrise today. We thank you so much for being a part of it. Remember, misinformation can cause chaos, so stay away from it. I'm Yomi Otaibe.
And I'm Ayo Makine. It's almost lunchtime. Have a good rest of your weekend.